And there we go. And you guys made that happen.
Hey folks, welcome to Survivology 101. I'm Norseman, and in this video we're going to talk about your priorities in a survival situation, as well as a little bit about the dynamic of group survival if you should happen into one of those situations. So stick around. So this video was actually shot at the local high school, and I was asked to come into the after-school program and teach a little bit about survival to some of the after-school program kids. And I thought that'd be a great opportunity to just expose all these children to the dynamic of, you know, the mentality of survival and the mindset that goes into it, as well as some of the dynamic of group survival. So that's what this video is. It's filmed in the classroom, and then at the very end, you'll see I do a demonstration for a bow and drill. And the reason I did the demonstration was I had them focusing on a task the whole time I was teaching the class, and that is they were building my tinder bundle from some jute twine, so they would understand exactly what it entails to take an ember and turn it into a flame. There's more to the class. This is just a segment of the class, the beginning of it, the portion about the mindset. So stick around, watch the class. If you get anything out of it, you know, consider subscribing and sharing this with somebody else who might be able to find some use in it. And let's get into the video.
Most of you know me. My name's Dave. A lot of people just call me Norseman for, I don't even know why, I can't even figure it out. And I'm Edgel's dad. But before we start, I'm going to give you guys a chore. I want you to, just through the course of teaching this class, pick these things apart and make them about as fine as you can possibly make. Just throughout the whole course, try not to pull them real hard. You'll tie them into big knots. And if you tie them in knots, they're hard to get out. But try and pick them apart to every single thread as much as possible. Just shred them up and make a big old bird's nest out of them. Because when we're done, we'll go outside and we'll make a fire by rubbing two sticks together, and I need that to finish the task. Make sense?
All right.
Cool. All right. If you look up at the board, that's me. That's just a bunch of my background. I just figured it was probably a good idea if I'm going to stand up in front of you and talk for an hour that you know a little bit about me, but I'm going to breeze over it real quick because I don't want to waste too much time on it. But basically, I was in the Marine Corps. I taught survival and a bunch of sniper stuff, and it was really cool. And then these are a bunch of schools that I went to that were also equally cool. A bunch of real cool advanced survival courses and sniper courses and NETO, things like that. Oh, there's a little bit more schools. And then this is kind of what I'm up to now, between the articles that I write for magazines and my YouTube channel. So if you guys are like totally into YouTube, I'll hook you up with one of my cards and you can go to my channel and like my stuff so I can get some more followers. I design knives for a company. I build knives for my own company. We do leather work, my wife and I do. And then I instruct, and I do stuff like this, and I do stuff like other local schools. There's schools up in Sandpoint, there's schools in Washington, and I just volunteer and I come out and I teach to students, kids, adults, everybody. It doesn't matter to me. And it's usually all in one way or another related to survival and wilderness skills. So, any questions about that? Pretty simple, right? Okay, the first thing we're going to talk about, I know all of this stuff is like real cool and sexy, and I can't wait to get to the point where we can start passing it around and messing with it, but the first thing we got to talk about is our heads. The psychology of survival, because survival is 90% mental. When you're going out or you get lost or you get isolated or lost in the woods and trapped or separated from your family on a hike, it's all about how you react to the situation. It's not about all of this cool gear. It's about what you know and the steps that you take to save yourself or to recover, self-recover. So this right here is a really cool graphic that I found, and then I threw that neat background on it to kind of rough it up. But what this does is this just kind of a visual illustration of how far we've gone to nothing. Because we started out as apes, we evolved into some pretty critical thinkers up in here with engineers and farmers, and now look at us. That's Nick right there. And that's it. So we're right back to the chimpanzee mode, except now we're electronically motivated instead of swinging from trees and throwing rocks and poop at each other. So So that's just kind of a visual look at just like how far we've come and then what we've lost. And right there in the middle is like the peak of civilization, and that's where people were doing all of this kind of stuff, and they were using tools like this. Like these are tools. And they were using tools like this on a daily basis, to the point where making a fire with this was just as simple to those people as this is to us now. In fact, they were probably better at that than most people are with this. It went out. Imagine that. So this right here, if you look at this triangle, this is something, you'll see it if you go into college and you start advancing on in your life. It's called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you take any business classes or any psychology classes or anything down the road, Maslow's hierarchy of needs will be like at the elementary level. It's where they start teaching you to learn. But it's real essential for survival if you can kind of visualize this. So these right here are your physiological needs, and that means stuff that your body needs to function. And what would that be? Just
food, shelter, water.
Well, shelter doesn't make you function, but it does keep you healthy. Water, food, that's it right there. Essentially, that's it. Food, water, warmth, rest. Those are the things that you need. And once you meet those physiological needs, then you bump up the ladder. You bump up to the next tier on that pyramid. And what's the next tier?
Safety needs.
Safety needs. So if you have met those 4 needs at the bottom, now you're concerned about your own personal safety. And if it's a survival situation, what does that mean?
Shelter.
Well, the shelter, yeah, you can reinforce it, turn it into your own little private fort, like you would build in the woods, right? You want to make it your fort and keep all the girls out and that kind of stuff, or keep the boys out, Sasha. And other security stuff. You would want to maybe set traps. Not traps that kill animals and stuff, but traps that warn you when things are getting close to you, because there's bears and lions and cougars and all that kind of stuff running around, and you kind of don't want them in your camp. So you want to set things, noise makers and stuff that will chase them away. So now you're working farther up that pyramid, higher to your needs. When you get up to this 3rd tier, this is about the time where we're not in a survival situation anymore, but for some people, this is the most critical part of the survival situation, is that isolation. Because once they meet these physiological and safety needs, this belongingness, love needs, intimate relationships, friends, family, all the people that you miss, that's what really tears them up. So if you ever watch survival shows on TV, what usually causes those people to quit the shows and go home is because they miss their family, they miss their kids, they've never been away from home for longer than a week, right? I mean, have you seen that on the shows?
Yeah.
And that's what it is. It's this middle tier right here. It's a comfort level, because this right here is where we sit most times. And then as you move farther up, it's more about spiritual fulfillment. It's like getting a job that you really, really love, and moving on and getting into religion and doing things to fulfill your life, like volunteering at places and doing aid work, that kind of stuff. Those are the needs at the top. So somewhere throughout our lives, we're always bouncing between these 3 bottom needs. Always. There's always a level of imbalance there. So whenever we get to this bottom need, then we're in a survival situation. So if you're hungry right now, then technically you are in a survival situation. Your body has a need and you have no means to meet it. Right? Unless you got some snacks in front of you, so you're prepared. You're going to go. You're like my star student right now. Came prepared, right? So, and if you're thirsty right now, not a survival situation, because you have water right back there in the sink. Okay? So these are the ways that we've engineered our world so that we don't have to fall into a survival situation. We don't necessarily recognize when we're going in and out of those situations on a daily basis. But the truth of the matter is, you probably go into and out of a little mediocre survival situation about 15 times a day. At some point you're hungry, you're thirsty, you're tired, you need a nap. Those are your basic physiological needs. And your job is to meet those needs, no matter what the environment is. So, mindset, the will to survive. So you can read through these right here. Know yourself, your limitations. Basically, that means don't push things beyond what you're capable of, blah, blah, blah. But the real key on this page is PMA. Does anybody know what that is? Positive mental attitude. If you have a positive mental attitude at all times, you can get through anything.
And there's a stark difference you'll see between those people that are moping around, this sucks, I hate my life, everybody hates me, nothing ever works, and those that are like, yeah, man, oh man, I screwed that up, but hey, let's just try it again, let's do this again, let's try this again. You know, those people succeed and those pessimists fail because of the positive mental attitude. And it's no different in the wilderness because you have no shortage of failures when you're trying to survive. I have no shortage of failures when I'm out there trying to do this stuff either. And I've got a ton of experience. So somebody that doesn't have experience, all you have to really, really rely on is having that positive mental attitude. And that'll carry you everywhere in your whole life. Always think, what good came out of this? What do we do at our house every night at dinner, Nick?
Right before dinner, we all talk about what we're grateful about for that day or for the time.
Yeah, just in general, what are we grateful for? What happened today that we can have a positive send-off for the rest of the night? So anytime something happens, for good or bad, you should take a pause for a moment and be grateful that it's not worse, for one, right? Like it can always get worse. Like you might be cold, wet, and hungry, but at least you don't have a broken bone. And if you got a broken bone, at least you don't have a stick going through your side. And if you have a stick going through your side, at least you're still breathing. It can always get worse, right? So positive mental attitude and a little bit of gratitude go a long way for a survival situation. So with that, like that's the skills and the tools that you carry with you everywhere you go. You have that gratitude and that positive mental attitude all the time. And that really is, in a lot of cases, 90% of survival is just that perseverance and that willingness to just beat the odds, so to drive on. But it never hurts to prepare. So here's your priorities of work. In order to formulate a plan, there are some consistencies that need to be understood. Essential to task organization, allocation of resources, the rule of threes, priorities of work, and the survival situation. Now, I just breezed through that because I really want to just get into your priorities. And your priorities, if you end up in a survival situation, which is when? When's a survival situation? Anybody?
Anytime that you're hungry or you need water or you're lost anywhere.
Anytime that you have a physiological need and you don't have a means to meet that need, that's when you're in a survival situation. So essentially, yes, exactly what you said. So when you're in a survival situation, you have priorities. And what do we think those priorities are?
Food, water, shelter.
Food, water, shelter, health or medical, right? So if you fell down and broke your leg, your priority is probably not water. Your priority is probably putting a splint on or bandaging up that wound and then moving into your next priority, right? Well, fortunately, there's a really cool recipe to remember the rule of threes, and that, or the priorities, and that is the rule of three. The rule of threes. Okay, you have 3 minutes without air. Now, what would be a situation where you don't have air?
Underwater.
Underwater is probably a good one, right? Maybe holding your breath. You know, hey, toddlers do it all the time.
Yeah.
I can't have what I want, so I'm going to hold my breath. But that's self-enforcing because they're just going to pass out.
Yeah.
And then they're going to start breathing again because the body knows what it needs and it's going to get it. But what else? Maybe you're in a snow cave, right? Maybe you're in a snow shelter that you built and it's not ventilated properly. You got about 3 minutes without air, suffocation. So you always want to consider the rule of threes. And 3 hours without shelter. Now, what does that mean? Because, I mean, you've all been out in the yard playing for 3 hours, right? And you didn't die,
Yeah.
right?
But you get all hot and muggy and you start to get uncomfortable and then you want to go back inside.
I think that shelter is just something easy to remember, but what it really means is it means 3 hours exposure to the elements. So if those same 3 hours were spent in a snowstorm or cold and wet in a real dry, cold environment where you're starting to get wet or overworked and you still don't have a shelter or any way to create any warmth, that's where you're talking about 3 hours. It's exposure to the elements. And then 3 days without water. So, and I'll get a little more into water later, but anytime that you head out into the woods or pretty much anywhere, is kind of your goal to stay hydrated at all times. So if you're thirsty right now, you're probably 5% dehydrated, which is well on your way to death.
So remember that, like whenever you're thirsty, drink, drink, drink. But I'll get more into water in a minute and the importance of it. And then 3 weeks without food. So that's another thing you see when you watch the survival shows, right? Everybody's like, oh man, I'm in a survival situation. I gotta find food.
Yeah.
I gotta get some food. When the truth of the matter is, they need to build a shelter and they need to find water, and food will come later. It comes way down the road. And then 3 months without companionship. And like I said, that's the middle road right on our Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Is that
Needing
companionship,
relationship.
friendship, those relationships, connection with other people. And did anybody see that Tom Hanks movie, Castaway? Was it Castaway?
Yeah.
Where he's out on an island by himself?
Castaway, yeah, with Wilson.
Did you? Yeah, Wilson was his connection. But what else did he have? Do you remember the other key? There were 3 characters in that movie that are memorable. Tom Hanks, Wilson, and one more.
Oh. I don't remember.
Ah, that package. Like he was a
Oh,
UPS
oh,
man,
yeah.
and there was that package, and this little package right here, even though it could have contained everything he needed to survive, what he needed was the mentality that I have to get home. So he kept that mentality of, I got to deliver this package. That's my goal in the world, is to deliver this package, and I will survive, and I will get off this island because I have to get this package where it goes. So sometimes just that might be enough driving force to push you to completion. You guys are doing awesome on those bird's nests. So that's your rule of threes. So here's your priorities based on your rule of threes. In the first 24 hours that you realize you're in a survival situation, and how do you realize you're in a survival situation?
If you're not meeting your
If your physiological needs aren't met.
If your physiological needs aren't met, but you can say that, but that's a really, really hard thing to understand. It's really hard to say, man, I wandered off the trail 3 hours ago. I have no idea where I'm at. I don't have any gear. I don't have any water left. It's really hard to just say, I messed up and now I'm in a survival situation. That might be the hardest part about survival, is admitting that somewhere along the line you messed up and now you have to start doing the hard work. So keep that in mind. And then once you finally admit, you might be into it for 3 days before you finally admit that you're in a survival situation and you have to start doing the work. And that's where this comes in. Your first 24 hours, you should have shelter, fire, water, and a rescue signal. That should be your goals. You should build a shelter and you should build a fire. And they should be close to resources, so they should be close to water. You should find that water and be close to it, and then build your shelter and fire and everything there. And then establish some sort of signal. And I'll show you some really cool signals in a little while. And your second 24 hours, tools, weapons. Why tools and weapons?
Protect yourself and get food.
That's your second tier on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the one that says I need security and safety. So, and those tools are going to help you create and improve your situation as you go. You're going to need path guards. That's what I was talking about, in case, Sasquatch comes in on you. He's going to trip the tripwire and alert you.
Bell.
Alert you. Yeah, a little cowbell for Sasquatch.
Yep.
And that's your path guards. And then hygiene and maintenance. You are going to want to wash and clean and take care of yourself and medically do as much as you can to ensure that you're in good shape. And then the remainder of the situation, the whole rest of the time you're out there, be it 3 days or 3 months or 3 years, the whole rest of the situation is spent improving on those first 2 days. Build a better shelter, build a more reliable fire, find a more reliable water source, find more reliable and redundant food sources, and then just keep building it up. So until you build yourself a Hilton hotel, then you're probably not doing enough. So there's no reason to ever be bored or idle. You should always be improving on those 2 things. Any questions there?
Not all.
All right. So, these are survival training aids, and it starts with, right on the top there, realistic and challenging training. And that means going out and doing this stuff. And it says realistic and challenging, but notice it doesn't say dangerous.
Yeah.
So dangerous training are like some of the guys you'll see on YouTube, and they're like, I'm a survival master, so I'm going to grab my bow and my drill and nothing else and go out into the woods in a pair of shorts, and I'm going to survive. And see, you can do that, but you need to do it safely. So I would suggest that when you start into your training and you start learning these things, set up a camp. put a tent, have a stove, have some food, water, everything you need, a sleeping bag, a radio or a phone so you can call home. And then go just outside your camp and try and live on this. And if you can't, and if you fail, which is likely to happen for a long time until you get the hang of it, then you can always retreat back to your camp, evaluate what you did wrong, and then try and refit and do it again. Supervised hardships, and that's the kind of training you'll get in schools and wilderness programs, is you'll get supervised hardships. And that goes right along with artificial stressors. And what they'll do is you'll have a supervised hardship, which means you have very minimal gear, and the artificial stressor is that you are lost or isolated, when in reality you're not, because you have instructors there looking over you. So they add these artificial stressors. And then no butt set factors. You know what a butt set factor is? Because that's real important that you push those out of your head. A butt set? You never heard of a butt set?
Is it
What's
like,
that?
I can imagine it's something like I have water, but I don't need more.
It could be like, I would have made a fire, but except all the wood was wet.
Oh.
It's an excuse. Butt set factors are just lame excuses. So it's just an interesting way to say no lame excuses. You work. If something doesn't work, then you figure out why it didn't. It's a science experiment. Every single exercise is a science experiment when you're doing it. So you treat all obstacles as teaching and learning opportunities. So if I'm going out and I'm going to use this for the first time to make a fire and it doesn't work, then my job is to say, okay, where did it break down? What didn't work? What can I change or do differently or do better in order to make it work? And then slowly work your way through the obstacles and the problems until you have success. And then remember the things that you did to get that success, and then you can move on to the next obstacle and keep going. And that's the real challenge right there. That's where that frustration comes in, and people end it. So temper your frustration with curiosity. So when you start getting frustrated doing these tasks, the thing to do is to ask why. Why did this work? Why did this not work? How do I do this? How do other people do it? What have I seen before? And just keep asking those questions. And that's how you really work your way through these type of wilderness problems. So, failing to plan is planning to fail. Anybody heard that before?
Yep.
It's a pretty common statement, right? Failing to plan is planning to fail. You've probably heard it, yeah. So, always have a plan. And proper prior planning prevents poor performance, right? So that's what all those P's are at the top. And all those W's and H is who, what, when, where, why, and how. The got was a military thing, ignore that. But what it is when you're going out, if you're going out in the woods to go for a hike, you're going hunting, you're going for a backcountry carriage ride or car ride or horsebacking or whatever you're doing where you could get lost or isolated, that's the point where you need to have a plan. And just, jot it down. Who, what, when, where, and why. Who's going, what are they going to do, when we expect to be back, where are we going, why are we going out there, just to ride horses or just to see the wilderness or just to take pictures, and how. What's our means of our plan in total. How do we plan to get back, how do we plan, when do we expect to be home, and if we're not home, what do? You fire out a signal flare and call the National Guard, or, so have a plan and then share that plan, because it doesn't do any good if you're lost in the woods and you have a plan and nobody knows it, right? So one thing you can do is you can write that plan if you're in your car or whatever. You can write that plan out on a card and put it on the dash of your truck. And that way, when the rangers come through and they find your truck, they'll see that plan and they'll know at least where you were headed, so they have a place to start looking for you in the first place. And because they always seem to find your car, no matter what. They always seem to find your vehicle, or the point where you stepped off, or the point where you went out in the woods and took a poop. They just can't seem to find you. So if they know where you were going at least, then that gives them a good idea. So make a plan and share that plan with as many people as will listen to it. And always establish go, no-go criteria. So if my plan, and I've been in this situation, that's why I'm using it as an example. If my plan is to go up to 11,000 feet and camp at the summit, or not at the summit, but short of the summit of Mount Shasta up on the glacier, and my plan is to get water from the glacier. Now I don't have to hike up the mountain 11,000 feet and carry water. My plan is to get water from the glacier, and I only have to bring enough to get up there, right? So my no-go criteria would be, if the glaciers aren't running, if there's no water, I'm coming back down because my plan is already broken. So you need to make sure that if you have plans to meet those physiological needs, that bottom tier of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you have a plan to meet those physiological needs and that plan falls apart, if you don't have a backup or some sort of a contingency, that's a no-go criteria. That's your no-go, and that means the deal is off. We need to head back and refit and kind of rethink this and plan a little bit better next time. Make sense? All right, and stick to the plan. There you go. You make a plan, you stick to it. You can't butt-step your way out of a bad plan. All right, any questions on that? I kind of wanted to push through the mindset stuff because I want to get into something a little bit more juicy here. And we're going to talk about group survival and the psychology of survival itself, because it's really hard to understand all of this and how valuable or invaluable it is if you don't really understand what's going on in your own head. So these are just kind of the things, and I'm not going to go too heavy into group survival because this is really more established for the military. I want to get more into the individual side of it. But these are just kind of some keynotes for things that will influence the survival of a group in general, because it's different. It's a different dynamic. It's a lot different for me to go out and survive by myself than it is for me to go out with a whole group like this and survive with the group. Because in reality, if all of us together were stranded in the woods, I'd probably be in charge, right?
Yep.
And I'd probably know what to do, and I'd have tasks for all of you, and I'd be like, you go do this, you go do that, you go do that. Oh, you're not capable of that? Okay, you go do that, you go do something else. And I would keep everybody moving and working towards that ultimate goal of what?
Survival.
Of surviving, of meeting those bottom two needs on Maslow's hierarchy. So that's going to be my goal. When you're out there by yourself, you got to do that all by yourself, and it's a little bit more of a stressor. But when you're working with a group, you have to include the group. So you might notice that right now, I'm going to go out and I'm going to make a fire with this. Does anybody know how to make a fire with these 4 items?
I've watched
Does
you do
any,
it.
huh?
I've watched you do it.
Does anybody know what I'm missing out of these 4 items?
The
Fire.
The bird's nest,
Yeah.
what you're building for me. So that's what you have to consider. Like, I'm perfectly capable of building that piece. But if I'm leading group survival, I want to get everybody involved. And it doesn't matter that I'm capable of doing that. What matters is that might be the only thing that this person is capable of. So you want to give them a task that they can accomplish. They can feel like they're part of the solution, like they're helping the whole group survive. Like, I made the bird's nest, that made the fire, that cooked the food that guy caught, that kept us warm. You know what I mean? Like, then they feel like they're contributing, they're a part of this, regardless if they are. But it doesn't do the group any good if you get one attitude infection, because they feel like, I'm done, I'm withdrawn from the group, I don't have any use here, all I'm doing is leeching off of the resources that everybody else is providing, I feel like a waste, I feel like a loser, blah, blah, blah. So you got to bring those people in, and you got to include them in the group, and include them in discussions, and include them in decisions. And it's like, hey, what do you think we should do? You know, the guy might be a complete moron. He might be a complete moron and not have any good ideas at all. But you got to ask them. You got to be like, what do you think we should do? Hey, man, that's an awesome idea. I'm going to take that little piece. We are definitely going to walk outside of camp. All right, what else? You know? And then, you know, just bring them into it. Make them feel like they're a part of it, because you just can't push people out. And that's another thing you see on those shows. Those shows are designed to pit people against each other. There's an artificial stressor that the producers put on the people that are in the show so that they go head to head. And if they had a show like that, and it had real people in it that had real survival experience and training, they would all work together, and they would get the job done, and the show would be extremely boring, and nobody would watch it, because they'd all be like, all right, you know, we know that Jim is a moron, but we got to give Jim a task, because we don't want him running off into the woods and giving him some drama to put on TV. We want to keep this nice and smooth and even, you know. So that's essentially the dynamic of group survival. If you're in a group, if you're in charge, Make everybody a part of the group. And that works in everything in life too. If you're in charge of a project at school, or a project for your employer, or a big group project, bring everybody in on it, listen to everybody's points, and then there's a point where you actually have to make a decision and start acting, because you can debate it for months. You know, you can go back and forth, but there's a point where the leader has to say, good point, good point, good point, good point, good point. These are the pieces I'm taking, let's go execute. And everybody's like, yeah, we had a part in that. We helped make that decision. Whether they did or not, it's irrelevant. You know, as long as they feel like they did, that's the important part. And this is kind of the thing that you always have to be willing to examine what works and what doesn't work. See, now we're getting some gas here. Remember what I said about that brown dust, right? And I want to keep moving air over it, but I don't want to blow on it because my breath has moisture. So I want to just keep moving air over it until it starts to glow. It does, doesn't it? That's that cedar. Can I have that nest? Ooh, that's a good nest. And once we see that orange glow, see that?
Yeah.
I'm going to take that. I'm going to go like this so I don't, because it's real gentle. So I'm going to do it real gentle, like a little baby. This can keep air moving over it when I catch my breath. And there we go. And you guys made that happen. So if you have to do this with natural materials in the woods, you want to try and make those natural materials match that stuff that you just made during this class. Fiber, real fine fiber, that's your goal. If you have a bus to catch, go catch it. Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys being here. And eventually it may go out.
All right, well, thanks for sticking around. I know that was a long one. Hopefully I kept it entertaining enough to keep you interested in it, and you're here at the end, so I appreciate that. I love you for doing that. Consider sharing this video with anybody you think might get some use out of it. I'm Norseman. This is Survivology 101, and I'll see you on the next one.